felek saldın beni cevri cepağa. Hey hey felek saldın beni cevri cepağa. Derdim bulgaç yığlap deme sen bir vapağa. Derdim bulgaç yığlap deme sen bir vapağa.
Welcome to Window to China and Xinyu One-on-One. Our guest today is Steve Komarow.
Hi, I'm Steve Komarow. I am the White House and Justice Editor for Bloomberg News in Washington. And my reporters cover news about the President, about the Attorney General, and sometimes events around the world. The first reporting I did was here in Washington, D.C. I was a local reporter for Associated Press, and I covered Marion Barry, who was the mayor of Washington then. I covered events here in town, including even the early days of the metro system, which is interesting because now they're having problems because of the age of the cars. So I've been covering news here for quite a while.
Mary Barry is a controversial person.
He was very controversial when he was mayor. He got in big trouble and in fact went to jail because of his drugs use.
Oh.
And he was a very in the news person all the time. He was also a very aggressive mayor, and he made a lot of changes in the city government. So,
how many terms
well,
he was served?
They used to call him mayor for life because he could never lose a local election until he ended up going into prison. And then afterward, when he came out, he got elected to the city council in Washington. So he's still with us.
You also covered presidential campaign in 1988 and in 1992. Can you talk about this experience to us?
Well, it was a great experience. In 1988, I was covering the Democratic ticket most of the time. That was Mike Dukakis and Lloyd Bentsen, and I was on Senator Benson's airplane for the campaign. And he has since passed away, but he was a great guy to cover. He was a very powerful Texas senator, and he traveled all over, and he was the conservative side of the ticket. You had Mike Dukakis, who was from Massachusetts, was a liberal Democrat by reputation, and Bentsen was to balance the ticket and make it seem more of a national ticket. It didn't succeed, though. They lost to the first President Bush in the election. And then in 1992, I covered President Clinton's first campaign. And that was an exhausting campaign to cover because he was a very energetic candidate.
Yeah.
He had meetings that would last until all hours of the night. And then we would get up very early in the morning and go to our next location. So it was exhausting for reporters, but a very interesting campaign. He got in trouble repeatedly for allegations that he was cheating on his wife, and it was a close campaign. He defeated the incumbent president, and with the help of a third-party candidate, Ross Perot. It was a really fascinating election. Of course, he went on to get reelected.
In 2000, you also opened the USA Today Bureau in Berlin, Germany, and wrote news and featured story from Central and Eastern Europe. After September 11, 2001, you covered U.S.-led military campaigns in Afghanistan and Iraq. Can you talk about this experience? How do you see this war?
Oh, well, to start at the beginning of what you said, I'd always wanted to be a foreign correspondent, someone who was based in another country, and they gave me the opportunity, and I was based in Berlin. And 9/11 happened, and of course, I was, compared to people in the U.S., closer to the action going on. So I went to Afghanistan before the U.S. Military operations started there, and I went to northern Afghanistan and covered what was then called the Northern Alliance, which was very interesting. It was very primitive conditions there. There was not electricity, there wasn't public water. It was
they don't have a TV for women.
They don't have yeah, there's nothing like that. It's a very, very religious and strict society, and very poor. A lot of disease, and so it was very, fascinating to go to a place as different from what I was used to as that is. It was interesting. The people were very interesting and actually very hospitable, nice to be with. And then after the U.S. military and their allies took over Kabul, I went back to Afghanistan and covered news out of Kabul for a while. And then when the U.S. got involved in building up for the Iraq operation, I was one of the embedded reporters who was in the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And for the next few years after that, I was routinely covering news in Iraq.
Okay, actually, so now your job is really amazing. The Bloomberg News editor, also coverage for White House. That's a job everybody dream about that. Okay, so you also hold is a BA in political science from George Washington University. That's amazing. Today we're going to talk about some issues, today's issue.
Okay. The politics of it now is largely focused on the fact that there were 5 Taliban officials who were at Guantanamo Bay, and they were traded for his release. And I think President Obama's opponents will say that these 5 people are dangerous people, and they shouldn't have traded them to get back Sergeant Bergdahl, that it was not a good deal.
Yeah, that's I think very complicated, because he was arrested, detained in jail for 5 years or 4 years, I'm not sure.
Yeah, he was gone for about 5 years. And, and of course the men at Guantanamo were arrested a dozen years ago, 12 years ago. So there are a lot of questions. The people at Guantanamo, are they less radical now, more radical than when they were arrested? They were sent to Qatar, which is a country in the Persian Gulf, which is going to keep an eye on them for a year. And the U.S. says that the U.S. will be able to keep track of them as well while they're there. And I think there are questions about how they'll behave. What makes it even more complicated is, as much as the U.S. has fought the Taliban, they're trying to make arrangements with the Taliban to try to get peace in Afghanistan. And how this fits in with all that, whether these people will play a role in the future with the Taliban, is something that we don't know how that'll turn out exactly.
Yeah, we will see. So according to multiple reports and studies recently, the head of Veteran Affairs Department, General Eric Shinseki, resigned after report by the Department Inspector General found the widespread problems, especially as in Phoenix office. What do you think? What are your analysis?
Well, I think this is one of the longest lasting and most difficult problems in the government. Is the VA system has never performed tremendously well. The quality of the medicine itself is often very good. There's no one better than the VA at helping out the soldiers, for example, who have lost parts of their legs, have had other combat wounds. They really have special skills in that area, and it's very important to maintain that. The problem I think that General Shinseki ran into was that he didn't have enough awareness and didn't jump on top of these problems of the long waiting times that veterans were having for getting into the hospitals. And so once he was behind on that, and it was almost impossible for him to catch up. He has been praised by a lot of people for other things he did at the VA, including helping homeless veterans and things like that. But this one kind of got away from him, and he finally resigned. He said that he felt that he had become an issue, And so it was better to fix the system with someone else in charge.
You said your team covers whatever President Barack Obama is speaking at the White House.
Yes.
We are interested in the story resignation of White House Press Secretary Jay Carney. What do you think he's leaving? So it seems he said he wants to have more time with his family.
Well, he has children, and I don't doubt that that's true. He actually has been in this job longer than most White House press secretaries. He came to the White House originally to work for Vice President Biden, but then when President Obama's first press secretary left, he moved over to take that job. And it's a tough job. You know, any piece of news on anything could require the White House to respond to it. And so he's constantly trying to keep up with things, and he has a staff of people, and they put out press notices, and they try to manage the whole information coming out of the White House. It's very difficult. And exhausting, I'm sure.
But President Obama seems, you know, he said, I will miss you, and you are the one of my closest friends. Seems he wanted him for longer, right?
Well, I'm sure he would have been happy if he had stayed, but he understands this is a time in administration. A lot of people have been leaving because as opportunities come up, they take them. And there's only a little over 2 years left in the administration. People are tired. And as a journalist, I'd say the more cynical look at it is someone is more valuable to private industry, to lobbyists, to other folks, if they are leaving when their friends are still in power. So Jay Carney is a valuable commodity right now, with the president still in power.
Who is the next press secretary for White House? Well,
his deputy is moving up, Josh Earnest, who has been with President Obama since he first campaigned. And he's popular with the reporters. Everybody knows him. So I think it'll be a very smooth transition to him.
Some people wondered why Veterans Affairs Secretary Eric Sanzuki and White House President Secretary Jay Carney resigned almost at the same day. Do you think it's a coincidence?
I suspect it is a coincidence, actually. I haven't heard anybody say otherwise. Apparently, Jay Carney had told the president a couple of months ago that he wanted to leave, and so it just took a little time for them to get the transition plan together and to move it along. So I think that it probably just is a coincidence.
I agree. President Barack Obama and the top Democrats pushed their 2014 fundraising in New York in February, hoping to give a boost to fellow Democrats competing in the November's midterm election. Traditionally, a president's party loses seats during his 6 years in office, but the Democrats are hoping to buck that trend. Do you think Democrats can make that goal in the midterm elections?
All of the polls and all of the data we have seen so far suggests that the Democrats will lose seats, especially in the Senate. The question is whether they lose enough seats that the Republicans take control in the Senate. The Republicans have to gain 6 net seats, you know, compared to what they have now, and then they would control the Senate. And people who have analyzed it state by state think that that's very possible. There's probably a dozen races that could go either way between the two parties. So what the president has been doing is helping the Democrats raise money. He has raised tens of millions of dollars for presidents. At the last reports, the Democratic campaign committees had over $100 million, well over $100 million available for the campaign. And those are the national committees. The local committees have additional money. The Republicans, of course, also have a lot of money, not quite as much in the last report, but what's different this year is that because of the Supreme Court, wealthy individuals can put as much money as they want into the campaign.
Wow.
And that has become controversial. You have, on the Republican side, the Koch brothers, who have been funding political activities for a long time, and they're among the richest people in the world, and they've been spending a lot of money on the campaigns. And then on the Democratic side, there are people as well. There's Tom Steyer, who's a very wealthy businessman who is an environmentalist and has been lobbying very hard and with the White House and Congress to prevent the Keystone Pipeline from being built, which is a controversial oil pipeline from Canada through the U.S. And he has promised to put a whole lot of money into the campaign as well. So the traditional ways of money, where it's all through the party, are weaker because they're individuals who can put in as much money as they want.
Also, Michelle Obama joined the team too, right?
Well, she supports her husband, and she has specific issues that she's most interested in. Obviously, we all know about her health issue. You know, she wants more exercise, people eating better. She has the White House garden. She's very active in veterans issues. But we suspect that we'll see her more campaigning in the weeks and months ahead, because people like her, they're enthusiastic about her, and she can help Democrats convince their voters to actually go out and vote. One of the big issues in a campaign where there's not a president running, and there won't be this year, is each party has to get its people out to vote, because the number of Americans who vote is usually low in these years.
President Barack Obama unveiled $1 billion fund to help boost defensive capabilities of European allies shaken by Russia's annexation of the Crimea Peninsula from Ukraine. President Obama will officially ask Congress to approve the fund. How likely do you think Congress will pass this bill or this fund?
As I sit here now, I haven't heard a lot of opposition to this funding. I think that most people in Congress support the Atlantic Alliance, NATO, and that's really where this money is intended. It would boost up the U.S. participation in exercises and other things, especially in Eastern Europe, a little closer to Russia. And so I think it's generally viewed as a direction that the U.S. was going to go anyway. Now, part of what's going on also is the U.S. is not pleased with some of the European allies who have cut their defense budgets so much that, in the U.S. opinion, they're not doing enough to help the alliance right now.
Why do you think they cut the budget? Because the economic issue?
Yeah,
why?
Yeah, they've had very slow economic growth in Europe, and I think the budgets are tight, and that's what's driving it. I don't think it's that they're against the alliance or anything like that. It's just money.
Also, it's very hard for them to put the sanction on Russia. What do you think? Because of the business or because the economic slowness?
Well, Europe, much more than the U.S., Europe does a lot of business with Russia. The most obvious thing is Europe buys energy from Russia. Natural gas especially comes over in the pipelines from Russia. And so they have that relationship. You also have business relationships where a lot of the banking of Russia takes part in, say, London, for example. France does defense business with Russia. So there's a lot of business relationships. And if you put sanctions on Russia, it's going to hurt those relationships as well. So it'll cost money and jobs in Europe as well.
Do they agree we'll put the sanction on Russia, right?
Well, they've agreed that they'd put sanctions on Russia. The ones they've done so far, which are very specific to people and companies, but to put bigger sanctions, say, to block Russian currency, to block energy, and these things that are more broad, they're very hesitant to do. They're saying that if Russia behaves badly in Ukraine and other places, they still might do it, but they haven't moved fast on those things.
President Obama also said our commitment to Poland's security as well as our allies is Central and Eastern Europe is our cornerstone of our security. Since you have very rich experience in reporting the U.S. defensive security experience, how well do you think President Obama's economic isolation on Russia will work?
It's an interesting argument. I think that Russia's economy has done very poorly recently. The ruble has lost value, economic growth is not doing well. And so the sanctions, even the ones so far, have been hurting Russia and boosting up Europe in comparison to Russia. They're hoping will put a lot of pressure on President Putin. The politics in Russia are complicated, though. Russia doesn't like to be pushed around by other countries, and if it looks that way inside Russia, Putin could maintain his support even if the economy isn't very good.
In addition, based on the one resource, it says $1 billion is part of money used to bankroll U.S. military efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan. Can you help us understand what is the situation in these two countries now? So can we interpret these two countries now are pretty safe and don't need that money as a priority?
Well, I'm sure Iraq and Afghanistan would like to have more funding for things. What the U.S. has found is that it's not always that welcome in the countries. They want to run their own shops. They've also had problems, frankly, with corruption where they don't know where the money has gone once they've given it. So I think there's pressure in the U.S. to cut back on this funding.
I think also people want to understand why Mr. President announced the numbers of troops will stay in Afghanistan, exactly like 9,800 people. Why Mr. President have to announce that number?
I think that military planners don't like that to be announced because it's telling the enemy what you're going to do. and they can plan for that. And if you, the argument in Afghanistan is, now the Taliban knows that 2 years from now the U.S. will basically be gone. They might as well just wait and then make their military moves after the U.S. is gone. I think that the argument from the White House is that they needed to have, for political reasons, keeping the alliance together, and also to pressure Afghanistan, the government, to improve itself, they needed to have a timetable, and they needed to make it public.
I agree. The White House also said, while President Obama is also reviewed the U.S. troop presence in Europe, given the continent's new security challenge, this review wouldn't undermine his administration's commitment to other defense and foreign policy priorities, including the rebalancing to Asia. What is the significance to rebalance to Asia for U.S. security?
Well, I think the $1 billion for Europe isn't that much money in the U.S. defense budget. You know, we're talking about $500 billion or more in the defense budget. The rebalancing to Asia has been a very slow process. I think that the U.S. wants to pay more attention to Asia. The biggest trading partners, including China, are in Asia. And there are allies, including Japan and Korea, who are nervous about China. So he's been trying to shift more attention in that direction. I think probably the bigger problem than Europe in shifting attention to China has been other issues. For example, Syria, Iran, the Middle Eastern issues have made it harder to shift the attention over, because they are very right now threats that must be dealt with. For example, Iran's nuclear program has been a top priority for the administration to pay attention to that. It makes it very hard to shift your attention to China when you're doing that.
I see. A group has built a nationwide network of Hillary Clinton supporters in the likelihood she runs for president in 2016. Clinton was not only the Democratic candidate. How about Elizabeth Warren runs for president in 2016? Also, President Obama run another term, like the third term president? What do you think?
No, he can't run for another term.
Really?
Yeah,
it's the law?
It's the law. The U.S. Constitution only allows 2 terms. So we're not going to see him run again. Right now, Hillary Clinton is the candidate for the Democrats that everyone talks about, even though she says she has not made up her mind whether she's going to run. She's coming out with a book about her years as Secretary of State.
Right.
And from all I can tell, it's a very safe book, not too controversial. It's meant to make her look like a skilled diplomat, what you'd expect someone to do in their own book. Elizabeth Warren, we don't think is going to be a candidate yet, but one has to wonder if there won't be another Democrat who will come forward. I don't know who that would be. I think that the Democratic Party, if Hillary Clinton announces later this year that she's decided not to run, I think it would be a real scramble in the Democratic Party to figure out who their candidate is.
Have you read the book of as Hillary Clinton's book, Hard Choice? That's a new book, just published.
I don't have a copy yet as we're taping the show. It's not for sale yet in the stores. I just read the reviews.
It's June 10th will coming out.
I'll be reading it.
Okay. I think thank you for your time. We cover most of questions. We have a great time. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Thank you for watching.
Hey felek saldım beni cevri cepağa. Hey felek saldım beni cevri cefağa. Derdim bulgaç yıglap deme sen bir vafağa. Derdim bulgaç yıglap deme sen bir vafağa.